Slauson Malone 1, Excelsior album review. Let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest album from Slauson Malone 1, LA-based singer, songwriter. He's been at it for a few years now. He's also a member of Standing on the Corner, who, yeah, they're pretty cool too. They've done a lot of great production work over the years, whether it be for Earl Sweatshirt or Danny Brown. And a few years back, Slauson really started to gain a lot of notoriety with his debut sort of tape weird experiment that was A Quiet Farewell. I mean, this thing made it around the internet like a wildfire, and listening to it, I was not too shocked to see why. This was a wild, eclectic, colorful blend of everything from experimental hip-hop to part noise collage to neo-psych areas. He touched down a lot of ground here, but it all came off very exciting. It was also just super ambitious. I loved the thing all around. Now, in 2021, Slauson put out his follow-up tape. I'm not even gonna try. Know your limits. But I was shocked by how much I was not into this album. Some of the jazzier moments were cool and a little bit interesting, but overall, this was a hodgepodge. And not a very good one either. Plus, the lo-fi demo quality of this thing was pretty, I don't know, mediocre. I just was not impressed overall. Now, this is the first time we've heard Slauson since then, and I know this review is late. This album came out like a week and a half ago at this point, but I did really want to chat about this thing just because it is getting a lot of positive reviews. I love the singles. Let's chat about it. This album starts off with the weather, and this is a pretty stark intro to say the very least. I do love how gritty and unnerving that it gets. I mean, it's a pretty colorful and neo-psych inspired album, but it's very gloomy at times, very dark. The shimmering, noisy synths are just the amount of color that this track needs, and Slauson's vocals are actually really downtrodden, twisted as well. Now, I'm going to stop you right here. If you're looking for an album of anything that's, you know, like a booming beat or a colorful chorus, you're not going to find it here. But for some really interesting ideas pushing genres into the future, this may very well be an album for you. House music, on the other hand, it's a little more straightforward. Throughout this album, you're going to get sprinklings of different flavors of hip-hop. Here is no different. Tracks like this don't want to sit still for a second, and that excites me. I love that. Give me more of that. Between the beat that just doesn't want to sit still and just constantly shifting, the weird production, and Slauson's vocals, this is a knockout. It also just constantly has this need to push forward, need to try new things, and that's commendable. It's not going to be for everyone, but for the moment, I'm really impressed. Undercommons, really great as well. This track is so somber, so unbearably lonely sounding. I mean, this is all just feedback, production tricks, and a piano. That's it. It's jazzy, it's tragic. You're getting a lot of flavors on this album throughout this sort of collage that Slauson has put together. But for the moment, it just puts incredible emotions on display and this thought of just extreme loneliness. Old Joy is really cool too. I mean, I know Bad Bad Not Good do have some production credits on this track, but this is especially harkening back to the early days of Bad Bad Not Good, that very icy cold post-jazz. It's very alien, but the bright and colorful synths as well as the production give it this sort of human touch to it. Just enough organic instrumentals as well, but then that's taken all the way back when you hear Slauson's unbearably alien, just far out completely vocals on this track. It's a bizarre thrill ride, and it's actually a blast of an album. New Joy, also really, really good. This is just like one of the best tracks on this album, between the bluesy instrumental, the bluesier vocals. But you also get this chorus, which is almost euphoric. It's a weird thing to chat about and think about, but this is one of the most instantaneous tracks here. And it gets genuinely upbeat, dare I say post-punk inspired at times. And the dreamy, neo-psych inspired breaks that follow are just so cool. And the very short and sweet Arms and Armor is also super bluesy, super soulful. It's only a minute long. A lot of these tracks do not overstay their welcome at all. But the super bluesy playing and Slauson's, once again, incredibly emotional vocals make it actually pop pretty hard. Now, I feel like Slauson Malone is doing so many interesting genres justice on this album. He's trying a lot of different flavors, and a lot of them work incredibly well, surprisingly well, but some of these experiments also do not go over well. Like Fishing for Drums, Piano, and Voice, this was just not needed. There's really not much to this track outside of a dramatic piano and a voiceover that goes nowhere. There are a lot of detours on this album, but a lot of them are more compelling than this, trust me. Love Letter Z, also, I wish I could love this track. I mean, I talked about some of the tension earlier on in this album, and here we are once again. It doesn't get much more tense than this. I mean, it's dramatic strings and Slauson's vocal performance, which is, dare I say, satanic. I don't know, I just feel like he could have pushed this a lot further. Destroyer X shows Slauson once again going for a much more bluesy and emotional sound. It's something that works on a lot of this album. This is not one of the tracks where it does. It's just kind of meat and potatoes. It doesn't really make me feel anything. It's certainly somber and bluesy, but it really just doesn't progress at all. Divider, also not my cup of tea. And that leads me to my biggest issue with this album. There's a lot of material here, and a lot of it just like makes my eyes wide and go, wow, what even is this? But the experiments that don't work are absolutely unlistenable, and this is one of them. Divider is a progressive synth odyssey. At least I think that's what it's trying to be. It's not doing so good. The synths by the end of this track just come off annoying, and that goes double for Slauson's vocals, which are just obnoxious. And Decades, Castle Romeo is the most human sounding track here, to the extent where I can't actually believe that it made the cut. It doesn't sound like it belongs on this album at all. It's not nearly as interesting as it should be. Slauson's spoken word performance on this track is just so boring. I mean, it's certainly intense with the strum guitar, but the lo-fi production on this track just does not do it justice. Like I said, when this album gets bad, it gets nightmarish really, really fast. It is a very interesting album, though. It demands your attention, and I think it demands re-listens as well. Half-Life is one of the most interesting tracks here. It is the longest cut here by far. It's almost 5 minutes. And in a sea of 1 to 2 minute long expressions, that's pretty wild to see, but I think that Slauson actually does a really good job with it. Sonically, this track is fascinating. It has some of the best production on the entire album, and, you know, much like earlier tracks here, it starts very somber, very bluesy, very rainy day, broken down sound from Slauson Malone, but it works out really well, and the second half that brings in this much more upbeat portion is just as captivating. I would say that this is one of the best tracks on the album, even though I don't know if I would like an entire album of this style from Slauson Malone. He even takes tracks like The Great Wedge, which is literally a 30-second drum roll, and somehow makes it exciting. I Hear a New World, like what even is this track? It's one of the most exciting cuts here. Between the colorful blasts of harsh noise and production to the very laid-back, dreamy neo-psych passages, this track does a lot in a little time. The extensive list of instrumentals on display and Slauson's dueling vocals make for a pretty wowing track. And as this album goes on, I do have to point out, it gets harder and harder to classify to just a few genres, because he's touching down on a lot. I also really love the no Geiger dub. This way that this track creeps along and creates an immense atmosphere very quickly is impressive. I just love the dreary grayscale color to everything, and the saxophone looming in the background is an awesome touch. It's simultaneously super cold, like unbearably cold, but also really human. And because this is a Slauson Malone track, there are genuinely some dub elements to it. I mean, that bass groove is slick. It's a weird track that should not work, but yes, it does. Voyager, on the other hand, is literally the most desolate sounding track here. I mean, there is no hope in sight here. It is so intensely quiet and barren. I mean, I personally would like to hear him work with some more ambient stuff. And yes, this is probably one of the most sound collage-oriented tracks on this album, but it's also one of the most exciting statements on this album. And when his vocals pop in, things just take to the next level. I'm feeling a lot of this album. On the other hand, Challenger is one of the loveliest tracks on this album. It's short and it's sweet, but the sheer passion on display on this track from all angles is so impressive. All while Slauson Malone literally hops around from genre to genre like he's fucking Frogger or something. And Us, Tower of Love, as a finale, is a great finale. It's a true broken down ballad from Slauson Malone. It's tragic and absolutely gutting, but it's also warped and completely left field. Yeah, of course it is. This is a fascinating listen, and one that was really hard for me to judge and grade at the end of the day, because it did take me so many listens to really analyze this thing. That's why this review took as long as it did. there are certainly some moments on this album that I would have left off. I mean, it's 18 tracks in almost an hour. So, yeah, there's a lot of material here. And let me tell you, when the experiments get bad, they get unlistenably bad. But, I mean, for the bulk of this album, Slauson is doing things with genres that you just don't see right now. He's a real pioneer in a lot of ways. The way he's blending genres and pushing his own genres out into new genres entirely. So, yes, it is not perfect, and I still believe that A Quiet Farewell is a much better album, but for right now, Slauson's killing it and doing some really cool things. I'm feeling like a really light 8 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.